Hello and welcome back to the New Dig Norfolk Gardener. Now here in the UK in Norfolk it is actually midsummer. It's the longest day of the year and things are looking really good in the New Dig garden today. So although all we do is do a June tour, we haven't done one yet this month, and as we approach the end of this month it'd be good to see just how well things are doing. Having said that, there will be things that are not doing as well, and that's normal. You're not going to get everything right in a single season. Some things work better than other seasons. If you look back on our playlist, you'll see that last year the peas didn't do quite so well. There are a couple of things that aren't doing quite so well this year. But in the main, June has been really good. We've had days like this where it really is flaming June, but then we've also had days where we've had thunderstorms, lots of heavy downpours, and all of that has resulted in really good growth. And the acceleration in that growth has resulted in plenty of harvests over this last month. Now, as usual, we start in bed 1, and in bed 1 in this strip here, this is where we're growing our first early potatoes. Now, there are around about 30 plants in here. We have harvested probably 6 of them, maybe 7, and they've been really lovely. And so next door to those we have the carrots that were sowed at the back end of March, and we've been harvesting them throughout June, the largest ones. And then next door to the carrots, well, you'll have seen on the last video that we released that the overwintering spring onions and overwintering onions, they have all been harvested now. We'd all but used all of the overwintering spring onions. There were just a few to harvest, but the onions, apart from the odd one that we'd pulled that was of a decent size, they all came to harvest over the last week or so. So we've pulled those. They're now back down in the house, and they'll see us through now for the next 4 to 5 weeks until the main crop onions are ready. And in their place has been a succession sowing, and it's our autumn and winter carrots, a variety called Eskimo. Eskimo is an F1 carrot. It gets to a good size, and a good size quickly, so these carrots will probably be ready as we approach the end of September and give us lots of food to eat during the autumn period. But they also stand really well in the ground, especially here in Norfolk. We don't get too cold with lots of snow and frost until we turn into the new year. So these carrots will be absolutely fine here right up to December. They won't get too hairy, they'll still be of a good size and good shape, and it's just like an outside larder that we can come to. Here we are in bed 2, and again in the last video that you watched, you know that we pulled the broad beans up the plants. We took the final harvest, and in their place has immediately gone our sprouts. And you can see they've taken really well, not a problem. You know, when you first plant things, yeah, they do look a little bit limp, but they soon get themselves up straight again. And also towards the front of bed 2, you can see that this is where we put our next follow-on crop of spring onions. They've gone into there. And they're coming on nicely, so that by the time we finish the ones that are over in bed 3, these will then come ready for our harvest. Also in bed 2 we have the peas, and I showed you those in the last video. They're coming on really well, and yeah, there's going to be an absolute abundance of harvest from these peas. There's so many on here, which we always get, providing the pigeons don't get them and we can protect them well. We always get such a great harvest from these peas. And you can see the tops have been taken out now. We didn't actually have to do that because the pigeons did us for it. We came out one morning and there they sat on the poles and taking the tops out. But what it has done is in turn it's made the plants bush out, and there are just peas everywhere. On the outsides, and the insides, the other side. It's just going to be an absolutely wonderful harvest of peas that I know Mrs. W is going to be very happy about. So here we are at bed 3, and in the first strip this is where we put our shallot potatoes, and they're starting to go over now, so it's telling me that they're starting to get ready there near their maximum harvest. There's still some green on it, so I'm going to leave those there because I do want them to get to their maximum harvestable size, because we are going to store these so that we have these potatoes to use for the next few months. We do like to use these because if we want to add potatoes to things like stews and casseroles, it's a salad potato, so it doesn't ever break up. You can add it into that, so you've got potato in there and they stay in the size that you put them in there. And you can see they are starting to go over a bit yellow where they're dying back. This is not blight, this is actually just how the plant naturally dies off. And as the whole plant completely goes that colour, that's when you know that it's at its maximum harvest and time to harvest it. Now next door, that's where the dug and no dig trial was. We've taken the final harvest from the dug side of the calabrese, and yeah, they produce really nice heads. What is left in its place are the cabbages, and we're now starting to work our way through those. But where we have taken the calabrese, I've got some other brassica plants that will follow those, and I'll be planting those out in the next week or so. And then as the cabbages are harvested and we've eaten them, so I'll have plants then to replace those as successional plantings. And then next door to the dug and no dig trial is another no dig bed, and if you're a regular watcher of our videos you will know that I planted some more calabrese. Yeah, they are probably 6 weeks after the ones that we have just harvested, so that's a follow-on crop. And then we've got some cauliflowers in the middle row. They're coming on quite nicely, and I expect those to harvest probably late July, beginning of August, which is when I want to start eating cauliflower again. And where we did have our pak choy, we popped in some kohlrabi immediately after they were harvested, and you can see now that they've actually put on quite a bit of timber since they've gone in there and are looking really well. And that's a second crop in that strip, and it was a successional planting. It's also really, really lovely to see that where we've planted out the flowers, they're all coming out now. This is a lovely tagetes, lovely orange colour. And we have marigolds as well that are now starting to flower and come out. Do like to see a lovely marigold. And there is just so much life in this garden, whether it be bees, birds, or attracting the predators in to help us in the war against pests. Really is so welcome to see. Now, where the tunnel is, you can see here that we're not far away from getting our first courgette. There is the courgette. And as that swells up, that flower will open. And if you haven't grown courgettes before, they're a great crop to grow because they produce in abundance. And if you pick them while they're really still quite tiny, so around about sort of 4 to 6 inches in length, then they'll really will be lovely courgettes. If you don't pick them regularly, they will grow really quite large and you'll have a marrow. Courgettes are just baby marrows, but in my opinion at least they taste better than the marrow. Also, you'll remember that we planted out our runner beans and French beans. So the runner beans are here. You can see they're already starting to find their way up, and hopefully it won't be too long before we have a nice tunnel. And as well as providing us with beans to be able to eat, it'll be somewhere to stand in the shade and out of this rather strong sunshine. Now the squashes are doing really well too, and you can see that we've been tying them in loosely to help them find their way up and around. This is a curry squash, and if you see down here, just move these leaves. In fact, here's one here. This is a tendril that they throw out, and it's going to grip itself around there, and then it will help to climb itself up. So we shan't need to give it a hand for much longer before it will give itself a helping hand to get on and up there. And I can see that there are some flower buds starting to appear, so hopefully not too long before we see some squash. We've also been harvesting the beetroot because that's been coming ready. So we've actually taken it out all the way up to here. And you can see there's just this left. And as I said before, when you multi-sow your beetroot, you just harvest the largest one. So this one is quite large. We've already had one out of here already. This one will be the next, and it will leave these two just to grow on and get to the same size as these. And it's one of the great things about multi-sowing with beetroot. It really does work, that you can get more in the same space. And as I say, you just pick the largest one that you find. Then of course we have the spring onions. We saw those ones in bed 2. The follow-on crops, so that we have some after these finished, and yeah, these are coming to a nice harvestable size. We have been using them. The ones towards the front of the tunnel we've already harvested and been using, so yeah, still plenty of spring onions to come. Now if we go over to bed 4, this was where our main crop potatoes are, and you can see they're looking really good. They were in flower towards the end of May and through the first part of June. The flowers have gone off now, and for this particular variety, which is Maris Piper, what they do, they produce a lot of seed pods. Now, the seed pods are actually poisonous. So whatever you do, if you don't know already, don't eat them. Potatoes are actually a member of the nightshade family, the same as tomatoes. And you wouldn't eat deadly nightshade berries, so don't eat potato berries. Now we have young grandchildren, so the one thing that myself and Miss W always try to do, we go round periodically every few days and pick what we can see off there. Our grandchildren are often out here with us in the garden, and I do know they do know what to eat and what not to eat. They're always out here picking peas, strawberries, raspberries, or blueberries, all the things that they love to eat. Carrots, because they love raw carrots. But you never quite know if they are going to be tempted to pick something like that. So for us, we always go around to pick them off. And you just need to snap them off the bush. It's not going to hurt it. And actually, even if you don't have young children to worry about, it's not a bad idea to pick them off anyway, because you don't really want that plant putting its energy into making these seed pods. You actually want it putting its energy into making lovely big potatoes. So on this particular variety, Maris Piper, that's what they look like. If you look at these, they actually look like mini tomatoes, don't they? But don't ever be fooled into thinking you can eat them, because you really will be quite ill. Now the other thing that's in this bed right at the very end, this is where we sowed our parsnip. And you'll probably remember when we looked at this a few weeks back, we had some quite variable germination. Well, we've got something in every row now, which is really quite good. We have been round and thinned them, that's quite important. If you remember when we sowed them back at the beginning of April, we planted 3 seeds per station to ensure that at least one came up. And actually in the main, eventually, we did get 3 come up. Now, if you're wondering why parsnips need to be in the ground for so long, well, if you look at all that top growth to that and what's been growing, that's what there is underneath there. And that's why it's going to take quite a few months to grow and grow into a nice large parsnip. The other thing is, of course, is that if you think that it's going to be a problem growing these plants in no-dig soil, where it's not traditionally dug, and people tell you need to make the soil nice and fluffy to a good depth, well, you can see those roots are going down really, really nicely. And the next time we'll actually have a look at these will be when it comes time to harvest. And hopefully after mid-November, once we've received our first frost, which are always very good for parsnips, and I hasten to add sprouts too, to help sweeten them up, we'll be harvesting the first of many parsnips, and you'll see just how good they do look in no-dig soil. Up here in bed 5, this is the allium bed. This is where we've grown our alliums this year in the crop rotation. And you'll know that a couple of videos ago we actually harvested the Jamor shallots. They were ready for their harvest. They'd gone over. And they are here on top of this cloche. We've got some lovely days forecasted for the next few days, so they are drying off and curing so that they can then go into storage. It's been a week or so on from that, and you can see that the gazelle, more than 2/3 of those now over. So one of the next jobs that we'll need to do is to actually harvest those and then let them start their curing process. Now, after we released the video about the harvesting of shallots, in fact I think it was called the allium bed in the no-dig garden, I mentioned about our garlic and how a lot of it got a lot of rust, and I'd heard from a lot of people that rust was quite a big problem on outside garlic this season, and I've heard from many of you guys out there too that you've suffered with the same problem. Lucky old Ken, he's managed to grow some in his greenhouse, and they didn't get the rust anything like it, which only serves to tell me that what I have been hearing around here is quite true. People that have been growing it undercover, they haven't seen anything like the amount of rust that we've seen on the outdoor garlic. So it does seem that we're going to get quite a poor harvest. Everything has come through, so we will get a harvest, but I don't think the bulbs are going to be hugely large. And towards the end of bed 5, this is where we planted out our celeriac. They're looking really good. I know you can see that there are some rather white leaves on the outside. I think that's probably the wind, where it's been a bit wind scorched, because that's been quite windy during this month. But in the main, the plant is doing fine. There's lots of greenery on it, and yeah, I fully expect them to come to a very nice harvest. And then of course, last but not least, the onions. As I said earlier, it is the summer solstice today. It's the longest day of the year here in the UK, and that always signals the onions to really start to bulk up. And from now onwards, they will start to get quite large and hopefully get to their harvestable size. And as you'll have seen us do before, these have been thinned down to 4 or 5. And yeah, it's a good example here. They really are starting to bulb up. There's 1, 2, 3, there's 5 in that one. And yeah, they'll, from where they were when we did the thinning about a month or so ago to get some spring onions, they really are starting to get quite large. Now here in the fruit bed, we've been having rather a nice harvest of strawberries. They're beginning to slow up now as we come toward the end of June. They are still producing strawberries, but not in the abundance that they were. But what is now kicking in now are the raspberries. And these are the summer fruiting raspberries. And yeah, they're looking really quite lovely. Who doesn't like a nice fresh raspberry after it's had the sun on its back? So we have the summer fruiting raspberries. As I say, they're kicking in now. Over the other side we have the autumn ones, and they can harvest right up to November if we don't get any really harsh frosts. And yeah, so raspberries are a really good crop to grow really, and one of the easiest fruits to grow. And there's not a lot to do to them. Just in our case, we feed them with their annual dressing of compost each year. The summer canes, after they've finished fruiting, cut down the old canes and leave the new growth and tie it in for the following year. And then with autumn ones, they're even easier. Once they're finished, around about November, December, just cut everything down to the ground. What could be simpler? And here we are on the other side. This is the new no-dig bed that we made earlier in the year. You can see the sweet corn is really putting on some growth now. The sunflowers that we put in between them, well, it's not going to be long before we get a flower on there. I can see there's a lovely big flower head that's coming there. So they're going to be rather wonderful to look at. Squash is fine down there, and then at the other end there, we're getting a nice harvest of lettuce. And at this end, if you remember, we planted out earlier in the month this fennel. That's transplanted lovely. And the tomatoes that we planted outside, they're doing really good too. And we haven't had any of those times during this month yet, touch wood, where we've had more than a week to 10 days of rain without the sunshine returning. So blight as yet has not been a problem, and we sincerely hope that it remains that way. Now, we planted these tomatoes between our gooseberries, and these gooseberries are now actually ready for their harvest. We actually tried a couple earlier and they are nice and sweet. They've done really well. They are still quite young plants, but we're going to get a good harvest from those. And if we just turn to the other side, you can see that the black currants, well, they're now starting to ripen. See them there, they're a lovely size they are. So it's not going to be too long before we'll be harvesting our black currants, and we've got 3 bushes in this garden. We also have a bush that we inherited. That's not looking so good this year. And we've been here over 8 years now. So I have absolutely no idea when that bush was actually planted out by the previous owners. Could have been here 20 or more years. We've done what we can to try to get it through this season, but it doesn't seem to be working that well, and I rather do feel that it could be terminal for it this year. It's about time it came out probably, and we planted a new one and started a new cycle off. From what I have read and from what I've heard from other people, these bushes are good for sort of 15 years or so, and then they start to deteriorate. So my guess is that it is just probably much older than that, and it's had its time. So next door to this particular black currant, we have the red currant bush, and you can see it's absolutely awash with berries. It's always done really well, this has. And you've got the odd one that's sort of turning red, but the main harvest of this will come in July. That's generally when they turn their nice pink reddish colour. And they'll be ready for us to harvest and then use how we want. So I know that Mrs. W already has plenty of orders for her red currant jelly. So good job that there's plenty on there. We are in the glass house and everything is growing really well in here. You can see the tomato plants there shooting up really well. We have tomatoes on most plants, just waiting for them now just to turn red. That's the cherry red. They're really good. They produce really large trusses with plenty of lovely sweet cherry tomatoes on them. Then we have the moneymaker. They're a larger tomato and one that's really good when you want tomato sandwiches or to add tomatoes to your sandwiches. Really, really lovely and a great taste. San Marzano. We've got tomatoes on those. and really can't wait for them to become ready, because you can make some wonderful pasta sauces, tomato sauces. And then the three along the back here, they're the gardener's delight. They always do come ready just a little bit later, but they are a gorgeous tomato. An old favourite you'll find on most plots, but they are a lovely tomato. And then the one at the corner, that's the Sweet Million, which is new to us. We haven't grown that before, so I'm going to be really interested to see what that's like and what it tastes like. What we do know is we're going to be able to get a taste of them, because we've got tomatoes forming already. And then for those of you that have been growing along with us with your aubergines, and I know that there are one or two of you that have, hopefully you're at the same stage as us. You've been doing your side shooting and helping the plants to produce. Ours are in flower, but not only are they in flower, but we do know that we are going to get fruit. And there's the fruit starting to grow and swell from the flower. So it's not going to be too long before we have some aubergines to eat. And this is a variety called Moneymaker. So I guess, like the Moneymaker tomato, going to be quite large aubergines, hopefully. Then lastly, the cucumber. That's doing really quite well now. We have got one or two cucumbers on it. There they are. So it's not going to be too long before we have some nice fresh cucumbers to eat. Here we are in the polytunnel, and this is where most of the propagation now takes place now. It's come over to here and away from the greenhouse. Remember earlier in the video I said to you that where we've harvested some of our brassicas, there's going to be some others to replace them. Here they are. Probably over the next week I should be planting those out. Also the swede, they've germinated, and within the next couple of weeks or so they will also go out into the ground. The tomatoes in here, they're doing equally as well. You can see there's plenty of tomatoes on the plants. Indeed, even the cucumber in here, I think that's done every bit as well as the one that's in the greenhouse. But again, I can't emphasize enough, it's important that every time you come in here and you see a side shoot to any of these, whether it be the aubergine, whether it be the tomatoes or the cucumber, make sure that you pull those side shoots. And the peppers, well, they're now starting, hello Poppy, they're now starting to get their flowers. So hopefully not too long before we start to see some peppers. Yeah, really looking quite good. I hope you've enjoyed this tour of our garden in June. Now what I do know is that you won't be seeing this probably for another 4 or 5 days, because we've got 1 or 2 videos that have backed up that I still need to release. But just so that you do know, and I'll say it once more, it is the summer solstice. It is the longest day of the year here in Norfolk in the UK. And already these 5 vegetable patches have given us so much, an abundance of a harvest. And there's still plenty to come. There's still plenty to harvest. There's spaces coming where we can put other plants in that will feed us towards the back end of the year. And then as other spaces become available, we will put other plants in that will feed us as we go into the following year. The weather has really been quite kind to us here. I have to say, it's been one of the better years for gardening. We've seen no late frosts. We have had rain about. We've had to contend with a bit of wind, but you can mitigate that to a certain extent. But the important thing is that it's not been cold. It's been really quite warm. And we've also had a fair amount of rain. All ideal conditions for growing your vegetables. And I know before anyone says, there's also ideal conditions for the weeds to grow. The great thing for us is that being no dig, we can catch them when they're small, and we don't see that many. Regardless whether you dig or no dig, the most important thing is just to keep on top of those weeds. Don't let them rob the nutrients from the ground that your vegetables so desperately need in order to give you a fine harvest. If you like what we do and you'd like to subscribe, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And we shall see you on the next video.